For now, we are going to go over to our guest, I believe, because Tesla stock is under pressure following the movement that we are seeing this morning. Dan Levy is joining us here. Dan, thank you so much for being with us. I hope that you were able to hear Praz's great commentary on this, and he was talking about the question about whether or not this really is fraud. So I'm curious from your perspective, Dan, to what extent are you concerned that this could be fraud from Tesla?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me. I think that broadly for Tesla, and I won't comment to the report itself. I think Tesla right now is in the process of validating and demonstrating the capabilities of FSD. Obviously, there's one side of this that we're well aware of is consumers and consumer uptake and getting consumers to appreciate it. But on the other side of it is the regulatory front. And, in general, we view the regulatory side as a risk that needs to be monitored. It's one where so far Tesla has been able to keep the functionality that they have out there. But the regulatory side is a risk that certainly does need to be monitored on the FSD front.
Dan, just give me your sense right now of Tesla, how it is positioned following the run-up that we have seen since earnings and the current valuation of the stock right now, given some of those macro concerns that you were just talking about. How big of a risk do you see that potentially being here then to the downside?
There's a lot of uncertainty for Tesla right now. From a fundamental standpoint, things are obviously a bit more challenged. I think people are well aware that EV demand is pressured. Their demand is under pressure. We obviously saw that with a very soft 1Q volume estimate. At this point, people are forecasting volume to be largely flat. We're flat on the year, which was once sort of an unthinkable thought for Tesla to have flat volume on what should have been very robust growth. So the fundamental side is challenged. On the other side of it, you have an investment thesis that's in pivot, and I think that there is uncertainty because the stock or the narrative is pivoting away from what was viewed as some certainty around vehicle sales, leveraging a cost advantage, and instead leveraging bets that people view as possibly binary, right? The push to autonomous, the push to Robotaxi, these could be potentially largely disruptive bets, but they're binary. People just don't know what the outcome is. And so that's why I would say there's an air of uncertainty.
Right, and people are maybe buying the story about full self-driving versus the reality of it being here. But I want to get your take on the Robotaxi here as well. Does today's news change what we might be anticipating from the Robotaxi moving forward?
Well, I think I don't know that this really changes the narrative. I think we're waiting for a couple key things on Robotaxi. One is certainly as it relates to today, any updates on the regulatory front. But we're waiting to see, any updates on take rates. And then we have an AGM coming up, which is a key event to watch for. And then certainly August 8th is the Robotaxi launch. And clearly this narrative needs to play out both from the FSD side, which is more of a, what we view to be driver assist functionality, as well as the fully driverless technology that Tesla has, alluded to, but really hasn't given us much meat on the bone.
All right, Jim, we want to switch gears here and talk about another EV player that's certainly moving here, at least to the downside today, and that's Rivian, the EV maker extending its losses. Shares are down just about nearly 7% right now in early action. When you talk about the disappointing quarterly loss that the company reported, they're doing this amid this effort here to revamp their manufacturing operations. They're also trying to boost, ultimately, the output here for EVs. How do you see Rivian positioned within this increasingly crowded EV space?
Look, we think that Rivian has a really impressive product, really good technology. So we like what's going on there. But we think at the core for Rivian is a key challenge on narrowing cost, right? First quarter was a fine quarter relative to consensus expectations, but it was still sharply negative EBITDA, all the more so on free cash flow. And I think what people are waiting to see is they've communicated a path to reaching gross profit break even by the fourth quarter. The factory re-rate that they just underwent or that they're in the process of going through right now is going to be a key opportunity to drive cost reduction. But in many ways, we think this is a show me story. And then on top of that, you have tough demand where there's potentially price pressures, which could further pressure the path to profitability. So great product, really good technology. But the question is on the path to narrowing those costs and reaching break even and ultimately profitability.
Well, Dan, according to the DigiTimes here, Apple is in talks with Rivian about a possible partnership. What do you think the likelihood of that is, and what does it mean for Apple moving forward, particularly after they've moved past the idea of an Apple Car and instead invested into AI?
Really hard to say, and it's unclear, if there's any substance to that. I think in general, Rivian is constantly reviewing or considering the opportunity for strategic partnerships, any of that could help. Certainly on the investor side, I think people are always watching for the opportunity for a strategic to come in and help Rivian in that regard. But right now, I think the core focus for Rivian really is on reducing costs and driving toward profitability. That's really the core focus right now.
Dan, does Rivian need a partnership like Apple?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think right now, like I said, the core focus for them just needs to be on narrowing costs. And as you could see with Apple, they've basically exited the car market, right?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Dan Levy, always great to have you. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us here this morning. Barclays Senior Autos Analyst. Thanks.
Thank you.